My name is Ken Masson, and I am the president of the Rotary Club of World Disability Advocacy. We're a club that is dedicated to the human rights of people globally. And I'm here with one of our members, Dr. Sylvia. Welcome, Dr. Sylvia. It's a pleasure
Thank you,
to
Ken,
have
for
it.
having me.
Okay, I'm in Colombia and you're in Kenya, so the
Yes,
world the world gets smaller and smaller thanks to the internet. So
yes. Thanks to technology, things are now coming together. It's like one small oyster, you can access anything.
yeah, I love it. I really love it.
Mhm.
Why don't you tell people about yourself and who you are and the work that you're doing?
Okay, for a start, my name is Dr. Sylvia Mora Mochabo Akinsiku. A graphic designer and a brand consultant first. And that's my introduction. I'm an entrepreneur. I run a company called Tech Hub Holdings, which handles events branding in different trade names. But why I'm in this space for today, I am a mother of three, and two of my kids are on the autism spectrum, which led me to starting Andy Speaks for Special Needs Persons Africa, where we champion for inclusion of persons with neurodevelopmental disabilities. On top of that, I serve at the Kenya's National Council for Persons with Disabilities, representing organizations for persons with disabilities and the neurodiverse community and caregivers. In a small nutshell, to shrink it. That
And
is, yeah.
and was it because of your children that you got involved in the profession?
Yes. So what I'm doing at the moment is using my graphic design, PR, branding know-how, and skills to raise awareness about autism and other neurodevelopmental disabilities because we have the same challenges. And I've raised my kids now for 13 and 11 years, and it was quite something in terms of getting lost, getting a lot of stigma, getting all the negativities, and just felt it's not a fair way, and what I could do to make it better for the next parent who might get her diagnosis, or at least someone who does not know where to start from. So just to support and champion for policies to be changed in our systems. It's a bit different here in Kenya and Africa, and generally the sub-Saharan. We share the same stories of stigma and no access to assistive devices, lack of knowledge and information, access to medical support, education, social protection is just shoestring survival, to say the least. So, and that is why I do what I do, because I'd like to
Okay.
see change in that space. Yeah.
God bless you for doing all that. And what are some of the challenges that you face doing that kind of work?
Challenges are many. First of all, there is balancing your own personal challenges because you see, at the end of the day, I'm still a caregiver. I'm balancing my needs, the needs of the community, and balancing your time also with my day job. Because at this point, it's like my day job does 20% and 80% is advocacy and championing for inclusion. Also, the lack of information and the stigma even in the spaces of advocacy, because not many people really do know and understand what autism and developmental disabilities are about. So you will find it will be the general conversation of other disability, sensory and physical, And when you raise the issues, because you're the minority, you have to do a lot of explaining as opposed to when majority of the people in the room share the same disabilities. So you find it being in a room where you're the only person championing, and sometimes you feel like you need backup, and there are very few people who actually have the luxury of their time to also participate, especially in like the public advocacy spaces. Because of, like I said, the challenges, of course, there's financial constraints, because all this is for sacrifice. It's not
Right.
like you're getting paid to do it. So there is also that fatigue that comes sometimes when you're listening to also your fellow caregivers, and the days when you're drained out, and you just and you find that they are supposed to be more understanding, the days when you're like, okay,
Mm,
today can I talk to you just a bit later,
hmm.
it's like that ownership of like, you are supposed to listen to me, I was giving
Hmm.
you a number, and I'm also an individual, and I also am going through the same things, and actually worse still, I have two, not just one. So it's quite a challenge, but when God puts something in you, you deliver. So I always just pray for grace to be able to handle it, and even when I'm weary, just to go through and be a beacon of hope to someone else. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the work of an advocate is you have your good days and you had your bad days, but
That,
bottom line is you never forget the cause. You never
yeah.
forget why you're doing it, and that's what keeps you going.
Yes.
And particularly you work with autism because autism is certainly misunderstood in many cases by people who don't understand autism basically.
Mm.
And an autistic person can be totally misread.
Mm.
And that's a challenge there because people who are not aware of autistic people are people that will see it totally wrong. So God bless you for doing that kind of work. So let's talk about inclusion a little bit. We'll get into the caregivers. I don't know why my camera is out of focus here, but I'm going to try to ignore it because you're the more important one than me. So I inclusion. That word is used a lot.
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit about what inclusion is to you?
Sometimes I feel like our definitions for inclusion is not standardized when you sit in different platforms. And there are times where I feel like equity is more like what we actually need when we're talking about autistic persons. Why do I say this? When we talk about, let's say, education, and we say, okay, we want free education for all, and then you put all the children in a school and then you mix them up, right? When we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about integration. But we have one teacher who's supposed to serve all of them. Is that
Mm-hmm.
really inclusion? Because I'm expected to learn the same way as everyone else. Yet, as an
Mm-hmm.
autistic person, I learn things differently. I need a different environment, less crowded. So, yes, there is inclusion, yet there is equity. And in this
Mm-hmm.
journey, what actually is the greater challenge in policy is pushing for equity. Because even if you look at some of the benefits that usually come when we're talking about inclusion, that we need equal rights, we need access to justice, we need access to education and health, etc. But then the kind of healthcare I need as an autistic person is not the healthcare that a visually impaired person will require, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me as an autistic person, you have to look at my entire spectrum of my needs. Yeah, and I need the
Mm-hmm.
therapist, the three of them. I will still need a support person in the house if we're having a nutritionist. This is required because we have issues with nutrition. And I will need, if you have a comorbid condition of, let's say, epilepsy, I will still need to have my neurologist. If I have issues with gastro, I need a gastroenterologist. And you find the challenge is as opposed to, let's say, a person of hard hearing who will maybe need an or the specialist for their ears. That's one person. So I need five and one. But me getting access for my autistic child for healthcare, as much as it's written as free, is very difficult. Yeah.
Right.
So what is the inclusion in that? Yet it clearly says in the policies that there should be free access to healthcare for persons with disabilities. Yet even just getting the normal getting covered with the normal medical care is almost a mission impossible. I've had instances where you go into the hospital because they say because of the pre-existing condition we're not going to cover your child, so it weighs on the parent. So
Mm-hmm.
going further than just general inclusion as we have them in the SCGs and UNCRPDs, we need to have that section of according to the needs of an individual. That is where we will get the true inclusion and integration and equity. Because if you just place me in the room without giving me the tool that I need to survive in that room, you
Mm-hmm.
have just done 20% of the 80, because now you're introducing other barriers, because
Right.
I'm now in that room and something else that has come up and I need to, keep up with it as an autistic person because of all the areas of the spectrum that you need to look at from behavior to sensory, you know, and communication. So that's where I feel we still have a way of going. Yes, we have the policies in place, but the implementation side of it, I think we have a lot of work to
Oh, we got a lot of work to do. And excuse me
do.
while I try to clean this up. Hey, did it.
Better.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, there's a lot of work to do. And I mean, you can almost name any area of life, and there's work to do in those areas.
Yes.
As advocates on bringing awareness and better understanding. So, I mean, you talked about the medical profession in particular as one area that needs more work on. And I was reading an article about doctors, and this is not in general because we don't want to generalize
Yeah.
situations, but many times doctors just have no idea how to work with a person with disability, nor do, and sometimes they even have a bit of an attitude that you have to work with too.
Yeah.
Have you run into those situations?
Ah, of course, many a times.
Yeah.
So that's where now relationship with medical professionals really, really matter. Most of them, I might come, I'm the parent, and I'm telling you this is the situation and this is how my child works with things. But there is that attitude of I'm the doctor, and sometimes there are things like in cases of emergency. Let's say you're having epileptic seizures, and you go and you give the instruction. This is what you need, and this is what works from your experience, but it will be more of like, this is what I feel. I'll give you an example of a time when I was going through a very tough time. I had, that was the only doctor I could see who was assigned by the hospital to my child. But it was a time I was very low, as we always, well, financially, I could not access. And when I was asked to go, when they're adding medication, and I was like, I don't think I can afford this.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor asked me, then why are you here? You see, I'm
Mm-hmm.
already going through enough trying to, and it was the early days of just getting to understand what autism was and what was going on and the other challenges that were coming with it. And then this is a doctor telling me that. And 2 days later, we get admitted in hospital, and the doctor just did not come to check on my son. So who
Wow.
do you cry to? I am here. Yes, at the point I did not have the cash flow, but then at least the medical cover at that point was taking care of the inpatient, and you do not show up as a doctor. You know, of course, as a mother, that was the end of it, and I don't think there is anything that can ever take me back to that doctor. But doctors need to be first have empathy. Yes, you could be having a long day. You have no idea how much of a longer day I could be having, because sleepless nights are like part of our story. Every day there's something new, a new surprise you're
Mm-hmm.
just into,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and being judgmental. It just needs listening to, because if that answer had come differently from
Right.
the doctor, that attitude, I'd be encouraged. But you see, at that point, there was now added resentment. I don't know if I've ever let go of that hurt, but every time I think about it, as much as we say forgive and forget, there are things that are very hard to forget, because as a professional, I think that was very unethical, and maybe I'll get over it one day. But there are many issues. And then, like when we have long queues and long lines, if doctors know, I'll be biased on talking about autism, and because that's my life experience as much as I do
Mm-hmm.
advocate. But the neurodiverse conditions and the challenges which are less spoken to, you find that if a doctor has said we have appointments, it takes you like half an hour. You're dealing with autistic children. Let
Mm-hmm.
appointment be appointment where you can. Because the longer we sit like in the waiting area, by the time I'm going in as a mother, I'm pulling my hair because I've
Okay.
been chasing a hyper child up and down. They are already dysregulated because of the environment. Maybe they get hungry and they want something they cannot access, the comfort items, steaming items. That's why you find we will travel with so many things just to make sure there is peace, so that me and
Mm-hmm.
my child will have peace of mind. But then the doctors will keep you there for over 3 4 hours, which is not fair to the caregiver or the child.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to be having that, let's have them inclusive spaces. If you understand my patients are autistic, they have sensory issues, then make sure your waiting area can accommodate them. They need space to walk around. They need, like sensory items. They need just those small extra mile items that are required. So our
Mm-hmm.
healthcare systems need to remember that it's not too much to ask, because at times you will find I will come for one reason, I'm living with something else, or you will see characteristics that are just momentary for that time. because they've been dysregulated, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of accommodations that they need to extend. Sometimes you call, it's an emergency, you can't access your doctor. We have our kids, but there are times when you just don't know what to do because you're handling a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no manual to raising an autistic child or any child with disabilities, especially the neurodivergent, where every day is a different story, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And considering like autism is an entire spectrum, but then none are the same, none look alike, none have the same characteristics. It's just a matter of accommodate me, accommodate you, share information, be kind enough when you're giving diagnosis, you know. Remember, I'm a human being, I'm not prepared for this, you know. If there is information and guidance, because I remember after diagnosis it's just like, oh, your child is autistic, you'll be having challenges. And even when you're giving hope, manage the parents' expectation. Because I know, like, the first time I was hanging so much for the day my child will turn 5, because I had that, like, oh, by the time they're 5, the convulsions will end. We're at 13, it's almost getting worse. And there was that hope that you were hanging on to. So just being honest and gentle, empathetic, communicate. It's not just listen, listen, listen. You don't tell me anything. You just scribble and tell me go to pharmacy or see you in 3 weeks. You know, take me through with you in the journey. It's a journey for you to understand where I'm coming from. If I have to, if there are things I've noted, try and elaborate it to me that this happens maybe because of this, because of that, and so that you feel like you're walking this journey together. And it's not I come here, tell you 1 2 3, and I have to see you and pay you every 3 months. For what? For you to confirm if the meds are fine or not, and then we move on. So it's a whole relationship. Yeah,
Okay.
if I'm seeing other support, like now for autism, maybe seeing a developmental pediatrician on top
Mm-hmm.
of the neurologist, and I have the GP. Maybe we have site issues like for for persons with Down syndrome or cardio issues. At least once in a year, let's sit together as a team. You know, what are
Yep.
you doing? What are you doing? Where are we? What is our end game? All of us, so that that
Okay.
synergy will bring faster results. Other than today, I'm here repeating the same story, I'm repeating the same story here, and it's all scattered. I think that would be a strategy that would bring
Mm-hmm.
forth better ways of managing the systems and managing a child on the spectrum.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and there's so much more to talk in that area, but let's move on to education,
Okay.
inclusive education. Well, tell me
Mm,
about your thoughts on inclusive education, where it is, where it should be going,
mm.
good things it's doing, areas it can improve on. Any thoughts on that?
2 days ago, I had an argument about the separate separation, inclusion, integrated, because all those are different systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was, because we have different, and this is professionals having discussions, and the argument was we need inclusive education. What does inclusive education entail? That's the
Mm-hmm.
starting point. When we're talking about an integrated system, what expectations are we having as parents, as students, as teachers? We don't just have, I'll be very biased to our system down here in the South, right? Specifically, demographically to Kenya, because we have just started um, assimilating with inclusion and integration of children. And there's this integrated system, a change of the curriculums has come in place. But when you go down to the grassroots, as much as that is where the ministries it's written, there is the career guidelines. But when you come down on the ground into a class with children who are differently abled, do they have actually the learning devices that they require? I'll tell you, I went to a school, a public school, where there was 35 students who were all having various disabilities. So I was imagining a classroom with that. Not imagining, I was in a classroom with children with autism, some with
Mm-hmm.
cerebral palsy, some with intellectual disabilities. You can name it in all severity, with one teacher and one assistant.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that that school or the education system is inclusive just because the school has a special unit where the children are? That's the
Mm-hmm.
big question. And that's where I'm saying we need to change the conversation to equity. Because as much as we have the children and being provided for a space, It's not a daycare where I go dump my child and pick them at the end of the day. I expect to see progress. I expect my child to be learning in the way they learn. If it is a tactile learner,
Mhm.
if it's a visual learner, if it's kinetic learner, let's make adjustments. But where does the system fail us in this? In the first place, 2 to 34, that's insane. My own kids drive me crazy. I can't, if I'm doing homework, okay, I always say this in all honesty, I can't be a teacher for children. Adults
Mhm.
maybe I find it
Mhm.
easier, because it
Mhm.
is a lot of work. Yeah. And I salute teachers, and specifically special needs teachers, because just trying to understand the needs of every student and how to handle them when they're having difficulties. So apart from that, we have a project at Andy Speaks where we are pushing for access to therapy, because we know for the neurodivergent therapy is very key. And when you're sitting in conversations, you as a parent, you know what it means both for you. It saves me time from going to therapy, saves me time pulling my child from school. It is part of their system. That means I've seen it in Ethiopia, it has worked. Like if I go to the entry level, to the end, I cannot even identify a child who's autistic learning, I don't know, four languages, that kind of accommodation. So that's as much as it's the only school that has done it and gotten it, because they have the resources, that is what sets us apart. Do you do it right according to what is needed? Do you give the students what they need to learn the way they need? Do you give them the amount of attention? But because when they enter in that school, it is one-to-one therapist. It is entirely therapy the whole day for them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then it goes reducing as they get more independent. And these are some of the interventions that, as much as we're talking about it, someone else does not understand. Like, what do you mean therapy? How is it going to assist? How does therapy actually affect education? So until we let go of the prejudices that we have mentally and attitudinal barriers that are there, and just have open-mindedness to listen and have conversations and have the right people at the table when you're making decisions, when it starts, not when you finish, then we have to fight for, oh, you did not listen to us, or now we have to bring our list of wars and things we need to do. It's a waste of resources. Now, I always say, if you have, like they say, no, nothing for us without us. And the minute you get it right that way and you get to understand, then we'll be able
Mhm.
to have solutions in inclusion that actually fit and benefit persons with disabilities according to their disability.
Mhm.
And we
And
do it.
I have the greatest respect for teachers. I mean, they have to understand all their students, and each student learns differently. But particularly for in a special needs situation where different types of disabilities and intellectual disabilities and all that, they certainly
Mhm.
they all can learn, but they all learn differently. So to
Yeah.
understand how to work with such a vast area of is I'm very respectful for them. I think
Right.
my personal thought is that it's not the teacher, it's the fact that they maybe weren't given the opportunity to educate themselves. So maybe there needs to be more work on that to try to train the teachers.
And train the teachers at the right time, because also if you look at our education system, it's like a circle, right? This teacher
Hmm.
had to go train as a teacher, so what the teachers are being taught at the tertiary level also matters, because in the investigation, until the point you decide you're going to be specializing with special needs,
Hmm.
um, we are creating a gap. My thoughts are, we are creating a gap. Instead of teaching all teachers about special education, and then
Hmm.
now like let it be an introduction part, so that if someone has passion, they get to know the basics. It's the same
Hmm.
way you do sciences, then you decide if you want to specialize in chemistry or not. The same way, if you decide to be a doctor, then you specialize to decide if you're going to be a surgeon, a dentist, etc. But you get the basics. So we need to ensure that our colleges are taking seriously the disability and inclusion matters, because this at the point of integration, no, at the point of early intervention, if I'm brought for a student who is dyslexic, I will not write them off as being stupid or not understanding
Hmm.
or playful if it's ADHD. I will
Hmm.
have at the back of my mind an idea that, wait a minute, this could be dyslexia, or this could be dysgraphia, or this,
Hmm.
instead of calling them a clumsy child, all this branding that starts from school. and then
Hmm.
it becomes permanent and ends up messing children for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So if
Oh yeah.
we empower them to be persons who can identify, early identifiers, then bring it out to the parents. Because some parents don't have access to know, other than your typical disabilities. It will be
Right.
something that I'll be like, okay, wait, that looks like XYZ,
Hmm.
and it's a
Right.
regular class. And maybe I can bring in the special education teacher and seek their opinion and how to approach the parent. Because even at this point, it's very key how they approach parents. Because some can
Hmm.
go ill on you depending on how you deliver the message.
Hmm.
Because stigma is very grave. I won't lie to you. It is one of those things that when, as a special need parent, you enter a room with your children, you have to brace yourself to just have the strength of, I know some of us have gotten to a point of I don't care, but there is that parent who's still struggling with their family. So going out
Right.
to public becomes harder. Or you're in a community where disability is something unspoken of. And if a teacher approaches you to say, "Oh, I think your child has a disability," you'll be like, "No, don't, I don't want to hear it."
Right.
Because it's just how the African society is. We have a lot of cultures that look down upon persons with disabilities that no one wants to be associated.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's one of the areas that the club, actually, the Rotary Club World Disability Advocacy, is working on or will be working on. And our goal will be to try to educate the parents so that the
Mhm.
parents understand whether their child is getting a good education or not getting a proper education. And if that is the case, that let's say it's not a proper education, that they will advocate for change. So the club will be working on that over the next year.
That's
So let them move to another area because you're so multi-diverse in your thinking.
mhm.
Let's talk about employment.
Okay.
Employment. How about inclusion with employment with people with disabilities? What is your thoughts on that?
I think inclusion in employment in African contexts applies for persons with physical disabilities. And
Hmm.
even they have a hard time getting it. It's
Right.
non existent for the neurodiverse community because it is an injustice that starts from the early years. If we don't give them proper healthcare, we don't give them proper education or inclusive and integrated systems and environments that are conducive for them to be able to integrate into the community, how on earth do we expect them to work?
Right.
That's usually my greatest question. Yes, you've given a policy about there is a set aside, like here in Kenya, we have 5% employment, government tenders, 5% are dedicated to. What about that child who cannot get into gainful employment?
Hmm.
Yet we're even still struggling with school transition, where we have ECDs and we do not have tertiary, we do not have vocational centers that can accommodate children with disabilities accordingly, because the school fees are too much work. When you go to the office, your CV is right, but the minute you mention, "Oh, I'm a person with disability," your CV is put aside because you're going to become more of a liability. Take, for example, the epileptics. How many get a seizure in the office and that's the end of your job?
Right.
And that's an injustice. But who do you run to as a person with such disabilities?
Right.
Because you're being fired, because you had a seizure, or because you needed timeout. So that accommodation that employers need to make, so that if it's, let's say, my room, I cannot, maybe the sensory of a sick person is too much light. Get me a corner where the light is controlled. Oh, you're coming to start changing the infrastructure of the office. It's too much work having you. So that attitude, first of all, is what we need to work on. And if you go to any place, and even if you look at our systems, it says, I was reading the Disability Act for our country, and it states minimum accommodation. Who defines minimum? What exactly is minimum? To the general public, because my lift has audio, my lift has tactile. Oh, there is a ramp. We
Hmm.
are very inclusive. Our office building is fully inclusive. Are we really? Why are we talking about minimum to that level? When we've not met the person who needs that extra accommodation. So
Hmm.
it's not a fair world. And if we're talking about getting to a level where diversity, equity, and inclusion is met, then we need to go back to the drawing board and look at the policies that we put in place. And then the other thing is, if I am denied employment on basis of my disability? Who do I run to? When the
Right.
justice system sometimes now we have cases where something as blaring as sexual assault of a person with disability is being thrown off as if I don't want to say you deserve it, but the attitude that you receive from the people who are supposed to be protecting you. Yeah, I'm just
Hmm.
I'm not digressing, but just to paint a picture. So now in the employment space where they have the choice of hiring at their own discretion,
Right.
where do you end up? So first we fix the systems, education, health, so they access, we train them, we bring out their talent, and then now we can say, okay, now let's put them in the job market and create those opportunities, not just for paper, but keenly intentional in that you're ready to change your spaces. The same way the movement about women inclusion has been there. Oh, now a lactating mother, there's a lactating room in the office. Why is it so hard?
Hmm. Absolutely. And I was in the employment business for people with developmental disabilities, and I particularly think the interview process is very ableistic. And For example, and ableism, by the way, for those who don't are familiar with the term, is basically a discrimination against people with disabilities. So you take, for example, an autistic person in a job interview. That autistic person, not always, but many times, will not do a good job in the interview process. For example, they may not have good eye contact, and that will be misread. Um, they may answer the questions very directly and not diplomatically, and that's going to hurt them.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of work needs to be done on thinking about the interview process, and not only the fact of how questions are being asked or how people are being perceived, but is the interview really the right approach to getting a job? Is really really good. Maybe it's
And,
better to
and
give them a chance to show what they can do.
practicals, you know, and don't write me off just because I came and I sat with you for 5 minutes. You can imagine an autistic person getting into a new space, seeing new faces. It's a new room. The lighting and the colors are maybe not favorable for them. And then here comes, I need to have eye contact. I need to process what you're saying and answer you within a certain time frame. And I'm still adjusting my sensory to just align with all the environmental triggers that could be in that space, you know.
Right.
And
Exactly.
then they don't even know beginning. Because you see now, because of that attitude of the minute you mention a disability, you're written off. Maybe if it was practicals first, someone said they were asked to do a practical, then they were the best. But the minute they walked in and they saw the person had a physical disability, and that is how they lost the opportunity, because of the face, you know.
Right.
So
Exactly.
we have a lot of stigma in very many levels.
So let's talk about an area I know that's of much interest to you, and that's caregivers.
Mm.
Let's talk about caregivers and inclusion. How does that work?
We're still pushing to for it to work.
Yeah.
You say, how does it work? For it to work, because at least most of the other PWDs are self advocates because they can. For example, why I do it is because I have nonverbal children, right? They're partially
Hmm.
verbal, but it is basic communication. I need water, I want to go there, I like it, I don't like it. That's basic communication. If someone does something, they might not be able to express it to me. I just know they're not happy. Or they use
Hmm.
one word to say, but I can't get into the details. But
Hmm.
when they're hurt, as a parent, I'm the one who's hurt. That's one point. Two, you look at the system that if we do not empower the parents to be the voice for their children, discrimination will go on and they will take it as it is the norm. Anyway, we are the minority. So that
Right.
needs to change. And we need more voices because we all have different experiences. Yeah. And if
Right.
we come together and raise our voices as one, we'll be heard. And what people forget, that child you're planning for who has a disability cannot go anywhere unless, as a parent, as a caregiver, I be intentional to accept, love them for who they are, and
Hmm.
take them out to take the opportunities that are there for them
Hmm.
to have healthcare, for them to have the education, for them
Hmm.
to also go out for those employment opportunities. I have to work with them, encourage them when they come at the end of the day with all the strife they face outside. I have to be the one to listen and be the one to protect and shoulder them. But
Right.
then you're not putting that conversation because it's them who have to do it. Maybe you are better at doing it and understanding it because you have that close, intimate relationship with that person with disability,
Right.
and you're able to, articulate it because you're living and walking the journey. And then if we look only at the life of the person with disability, right? For
Right.
example, right now, our benefits for, let's say, car importation for tax exemption is set for persons with disability. My child, because of epilepsy, because of not being intellectually capable to take some very complex instructions, and also their fine motor skills, might never be able to drive. Yet
Right.
there is a clause that it is them, it has to be imported under them. Yet that caregiver is the one who carries that child on their back to take them to therapy to try and do all this. I've met parents who they're the ones now looking for therapy because their backs can't do it no more, and
Mm-hmm.
they can't afford wheelchairs. So who's
Mm-hmm.
suffering here? We are breaking our backs to build our children. But if we
Right.
don't work with us together as a team, it's not a win-win situation.
Right.
Win-win in terms of if I am able and capable to be supported by government so that I'm able to go work comfortably and provide for my child.
Mm-hmm.
When we say, oh, market spaces are kept aside for persons with disability, my child cannot sell, they cannot count, they still can't even color within a circle, and they're 13. What are
Mm-hmm.
13-year-olds doing? They're doing great things, you know, and it breaks you as a parent because you want to do something. And most of us quit our jobs to do caregiving. So if that support system does not come from the government and provision and
Right.
recognition that some of these benefits need to be extended to the caregivers, because we're the ones who 24/7 have to make sure this child can do some of these things,
Right.
then we're not moving. So if I'm supposed to care, provide food, yet I have so many other bills to take care of. I'm supposed to be getting medication for those who are on medication, getting specialist advice, and you're not empowering me. You're not giving me that tax relief to be able to accommodate all these other extra expenses. It's an unfair state.
Right. And I know, and I can speak for the United States because that's where I was from. And I worked in an employment situation in a nonprofit. And I was shocked that people getting jobs as caregivers who had zero background in it. There was no
Mhm.
training for them. I mean, it's such a critical job.
Yeah.
There needs to be more training for the caregivers.
Yes, and accessible free training if possible. Because if you come and tell me I need to pay for a course to do caregiving, then I'm already struggling. Those some of those reasonable accommodations to just meet someone halfway, or even have an agreement where I will train you for free. Then, as you get paid, you can be, the same way we do for universities and education. You owe, and then you pay back when things are stable. Different levels of empowerment are there. It's just that accommodation to be able to meet each other halfway is non-existent.
Let let's say we've got let's say where are we time? Oh, let's say we got another 5 to 10 minutes. So I know you and I are both in Rotary. Um, sorry. I'm the president of the Rotary Club of World Disability Advocacy, and you are an honorary member. We're so glad to have you on board.
Thank you.
And you're also active in Rotary in Kenya. And when we talk about inclusion, that's also important in Rotary because um, people with disabilities are 15 to 20% of the world, probably more, and which makes it the largest minority in the world. And I know Rotary organizations, Lions clubs, other organizations are constantly looking for members, but oftentimes they don't bring in the person with disabilities for various reasons, of mostly because of um, lack of knowledge. So I just wanted to give a little plug if anybody's out there in Rotary to think about the people with disabilities and being members of your club. Inclusion is important. There was a cartoon that I saw that a person was talking to a hotel manager and said, "Your hotel is not accessible." And the manager said, "Well, we don't have anybody with disabilities here." And it's the same thing with Rotary. If you're not accessible, you're not going to have people with disabilities.
Yeah.
Um, and I know you work on the district level too in Kenya, and hopefully you can get some influence over there to make sure that people with disabilities are included and looked at for their abilities and how they would be a good Rotarians, not because they have a disability. And and that includes both physical disabilities and
You know,
intellectual disabilities. Sorry. um, I know I was talking to in one particular situation when the person said, "Well, we had an autistic person in the event we were doing, but they disrupted everything." Well, that's a misunderstanding. Not on the autistic side, but on the person
yeah,
who, yeah, they they were disrupting for a particular reason, but they really were not disrupting. They were being themselves. So
yeah.
I just want to give a little plug on Rotary on all that. So we talked about a lot of the challenges that are going on. There are many more that we can talk about. But let's get down to what is the power of the individual? What can a person do to try to change the system?
Um, it takes one person from different levels to change the system and to have that ripple effect. When the water is calm, all of it is calm in a glass. But one drop of water can cause a ripple effect. And that is the power of an individual. If you choose to stand out and go and have those hard conversations and make the sacrifices, because being an advocate is actually a sacrifice. I've not seen my kids, I think I saw them for like 3 hours because of work and being out there and supporting the system. Those are the sacrifices that it takes. Yet I know as an individual, I might not live to see my children benefit for what we're fighting for now. If I get to, I'll be very, very happy. But I trust and believe whatever the little that we're getting back, it takes only one person to stand up and one voice to change the system. So long as also the other voices, as much as you might not come out and stand out, be that backbone, help them push the conversation on the grassroots because you can do so much as an individual, especially when something is of such great magnitude, because it requires a lot of resilience. It requires a lot of energy, a lot of grit, a lot of strength physically and emotionally, especially,
Mhm.
and just not to give up because you can. you know it takes that one person to start the conversation for it to keep going and others to join in because even the light starts with the matchstick lights the candle can light another candle and another candle. That's the power of one. So if each one of us just does it in our small areas in a little way and look at it, then it will become a bigger ripple effect. If you
Mhm.
look at it, and the ocean did not just appear, right? It takes all the
Mhm.
raindrops to form in all their different places and the rivers to form and come and drain in the ocean. And then we have this massive body that we all, respect.
Mhm.
So if we all come together, just in your small way as an individual, as much as you say, oh, but I'm a, no, that one small person is what it takes to be heard. Just with the right positioning, talk to the right, change makers. And I'm sure if all of it comes together, because if you talk to this person, they go to another room, someone else mentions that, oh, someone was talking about this. That makes two, right? Actually, not two. Two people talked about it, four people are now talking about it.
Right.
That's the ripple effect. Let's just go out there and do it, no matter how minimal. In Swahili, we have a saying that says "haba na haba hujaza kibaba," which means um, small bits in the end fill up the whatever it is that you want to do, right? So that is it, and it's the same aspect that we say when we want to do change. If I'll give an example of like Wangari Maathai is one of our, the Wangari Maathai, she's awarded the peace what? Yeah, that's international award for peace.
Mhm. Yep.
It
Yep.
just skipped my
Yep.
mind. Yeah. But when she was here in Kenya talking about trees and planting trees, we all thought like, most of the people were like, why is this woman forever walking, demonstrating, walking with pigs and trees? But look at the conversation now, right? Yes, the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize. Look at the conversation now, it's all climate change. But here in Kenya, nobody will forget that Wangari was talking about this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, depending on how old you are and at what point you had conversation. So we just
Hmm.
keep going, we just keep giving. Don't tire, pray for grace. I'm sure God always gives grace. I'll tell you for free. I could not wake up today, but here I am.
Hmm.
Yeah, so just keep moving.
What you had to say was so perfect. I'm not even going to add to it because I think it's perfect. I'm the president of the Rotary Club of World Disability Advocacy. We work on global human rights issues around the world. If people need to get in touch would like to get in touch with the Rotary Club, it's rotarywda@gmail.com. And Dr. Sylvia, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
My social media, just as my name is stated, Sylvia Mochabo Akisiku, I always respond. We have Andy Speaks for Special Needs Persons, which is the organization that I champion through. And we are on Instagram as Andy Speaks. On Twitter, we usually have great conversations on mass policy, to see what's going on, current affairs. That is Andy Speaks with the number 4 at the end. And for our website is www.andyspeaksforspecialneedspersons.org. And we have actually an information web portal where we have demystified all these neurodevelopmental disabilities and autism, what it is, how to manage it, and literature to read if you want to to like immerse yourself into the details of it, and support systems for parents, linkages, an e-commerce platform for purchasing of assistive devices. It's taken me 4 years to get that together in the bid to just make it easier from the very many phone calls of parents trying to know where to go. Because in the resource platform, we're trying to also enlist all the schools, all the doctors, hospitals that offer the various services that are there. Because trust me, it's like a maze out there when you're trying to walk this journey. So that would be the best. So for personal email, you can use the office is support at Andy Speaks for Special Needs Persons.org, or Sylvia with a Y at Andy Speaks for Special Needs Persons.org. All of that is the word.
Very good. Thank you.
And
For,
and there's a WhatsApp there on the website. You can WhatsApp through there.
very good. Thank you. We're going to have you back at some point because you've got such a wide range of things you can talk about. And I know you're getting more involved in the club and much appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to working more with you on this. So thank you very much. And
Thank
we
you
will hope everybody has a good day.
All right. Thank you for having me and for the opportunity to discuss inclusion
Okay.
matters. Thank
Very
you.
good.
Have a fabulous evening or night or morning.